Good morning. That is a lot of me to look at this early in the morning. Sorry for the slide. So I'm William Vanderbloemen, and for the record, I did not pick the last name out. It just is what I was born with. In fact, my mother's father used to take his daughters and son-in-laws on trips every now and then, and about every other year they'd go to Europe. And sometimes there was golf tied into it, sometimes it wasn't, but Granddad would ask all of the boys to figure out where they were going to eat when they were in you host this city, you host this city. Well, they decided to visit Amsterdam one time. It's where Vanderbloemen, that's kind of my people. And Granddad said to my dad, okay, you need to make a reservation for us. This is before smartphones and Yelp and Open Table and all these things. And so he had to get like the Fodor's book out, like you remember that far back, and looked up a place, found it, he called, he said, I'd like to make a reservation for a table for 8 in the name of Vanderbloemen. And they said, I'm sorry, Mr. Vanderbloemen, we are a bistro, we only have little tables. And he said, well, okay, fine, can we do 2 tables, 2 reservations, one in the name of Beach, one in the name of Vanderbloemen. They said, that'll be fine. Can you spell that? He said, sure. V-A-N-D-E-R. No, sir. Spell beach. And if you're old enough to remember the show Cheers, it's like everybody knows my name. You felt at home. It's so much better when you walk into a club and you feel like you're at home. The reason people go to participate in golf a lot of times is because they feel like they're known. I'm coming to you today, and I'm so excited to be with you to talk about how to build an irresistible presence in your clubs. But I'm really excited to be with you because I've been trying to learn golf for forever. Just ask Doug. There's a lot for me to learn. I've got a whole lot left to learn. I was studying data patterns of shot spray before it was ever a thing and there were ever computers. The only reason I was the range boy at our club, and our pro was so cheap he wouldn't buy a cage for me to do the range in, right? He just had one of those trailer things that went on the back of the golf cart, and here I am 14 years old, excited I got to drive a cart at 14 years old, but it didn't even have a top. It was the cheapest, oldest cart that he had, and he'd send me out to pick the range, and he was also so cheap that he didn't buy enough range balls for when we were busy. So the range would get busy, William, go get golf balls, but there are people hitting, there's no top on them. And so I learned early on, like 90% of the misses at our club were to the right. So you mow the left side of the range. So long before there was TrackMan, I could have told you the ball goes to the right, not to the left, and I would pick balls on the left side of the range. So I have been a part of living what you guys live. Everybody says, oh, it must be so fun to be a golf pro. You get to play all the time. No. It must be so great to be a golf pro because you get to enjoy the sport. No. You don't get to do much playing at all. My heart is with you guys for pushing the game forward. I've loved it forever. I've loved being a part of the STPGA through my kids who played junior golf. So thank you for letting me be with you today. I want to talk a little bit today, and let's see if I can figure the clicker out, about how you make yourself irreplaceable. And I think in the industry that you guys are serving, this is a question worth asking. Last year I had the privilege of getting to speak to a bunch of people from Golf Tech out in Phoenix before the Waste Management. And when we were talking, I just kind of brought it up. I thought out loud, you guys have all this, data, simulators. How long is it before I don't come see Doug anymore? How long till I just buy a simulator and just learn at home? Or have AI teach me, right? And the room went pretty silent, and I didn't realize I hit a nerve. But I think everybody's a little worried as the world's changing, like how am I going to stand out of the crowd? How am I going to be irreplaceable? How am I going to be someone people remember and want to come back to? Whether that's teaching great juniors, like we saw in our award winner, Like, how are you going to get people to say, that one is irreplaceable in my life? This is a question I've been asking. I own an executive search firm. We get hired to find, the top talent of whatever organization hires us to go find people. So we've been studying what makes people irreplaceable. Have you ever met someone and within 5 minutes you're like, that one's a winner? There's just something about them, there's something amazing, there's something that they're doing, there's something that within 5 minutes you're like, I believe in them, I want to be a part, I want to hire them, I want to ask them out, whatever the situation may be. You've had those moments, right? Where you meet someone like that. For years, I've wondered, what is that person doing to me that makes me feel immediately connected? And is there a way to learn how to do that? And after working with top executives for 16 years now, we think we've done enough repetitions that we've kind of done our own TrackMan on what top performers do, and we think we've uncovered some things that'll be helpful. Now, being irreplaceable is maybe more important now than ever. The workforce is more crowded than it's ever been. For the first time in US history, we have 5 generations sharing the workforce. Let's see if I can make my slide move. Yes, 5 generations are in the workforce. The traditionalists, or the builders, the millennials, which are me, the baby boomers, which are retiring, the Gen X, Gen Z, and it's changing rapidly. There are people walking around saying, I feel like I'm old and irrelevant, I don't know what AI is. There are people that are young, probably on your staffs are like, I'll never get heard because I'm not old enough. It's a crowded place. How do you stand out and be irreplaceable? By the way, they're not just 5 generations. There's a 6th one entering the workforce. If you look at the builders, the boomers, X, Y, Gen Z, my youngest kid's gonna be Gen A, but moving into our workforce right now, Gen AI. Most of the experts I listen to are saying that within the next 10 years, about 40% of jobs in the US are going to radically change, be eliminated, and people who have not adapted will be left behind. I read a McKinsey study to show which professions will get replaced in the next 10 years. Look at this chart. The lawyers are going away. Good news, right? Far fewer members at your courses, but right underneath that is everybody in this room. People that are in life science occupations, physical science, social science, lots and lots of jobs are about to go away. So how do you stand out? How do you be irreplaceable? How do you build your team in a way that they're irreplaceable? I mean, what would it be like if people walked out of your pro shop and said, that James Brown, he is something else. I mean, I don't know what it is, but he is irreplaceable for me. Or what if your entire team were a club where a new person comes in and they're like, everyone I met with, everyone I interacted with was absolutely amazing. That's the race that I think is about to happen. As the workforce gets crowded, as the economy continues to be uncertain, as this boom that golf has seen for the first time since after World War II starts to wear off, it's going to get harder and harder to stand out. And I want to share some things with you today that I'm learning about top performers that might help you in your ability to serve your people better and to be irreplaceable in their life and to build a team that does the same thing. So, really quickly, having done 3,000 executive searches and completed them and worked with top talent all over the world, here's what teams will stand out of the crowd. This is just kind of a bonus slide, and then we'll dive into what individuals look like. We have 7 kids. We vacation in Utah in the summers and play golf up there because Houston is Houston in the summer. So when we're up there, we have 7 kids, and when we're in Utah with 7 kids, everybody thinks we're from there. All 7 kids have come to me. The oldest one's 30, works for software development. Youngest one is an 8th grader, and they all say, what should I do to succeed in my job? Dad, you study people who have great jobs. What do the best people do? And so here is your secret for success in whatever you do. If you will do what you say you're going to do, and if you will do it on the schedule that you promised you would do it, and if you would do it on the budget that you said you will do it, and if you will focus on their solutions and not their problems, you will be a winning team. It's really not hard. Just do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it at the price you promised. I don't know if you remember a month or 2 ago, Warren Buffett's right-hand man died. His name was Charlie, I forget his last name. But the social media world's been full of clips of his wisdom, because he was kind of a snarky, really funny guy. And one thing he said, somebody said, well, when did you and Warren really begin to take off in business? He said, well, that's when we figured out we needed to get into businesses where our competitors were being run by idiots. And it turns out there's a lot of them. But it's so true in any service industry. All you have to do is do what you said you're going to do on the schedule you promised, at the price you promised, and be focused on solutions. You do that, you'll be in the top 5% of whatever you go into, I tell my 7 children. And I've not found one company we've worked with that's a top performer that doesn't do those 4 simple things. So if you as a team want to be irreplaceable, just do those 4 things and you'll be fine. But I'm kind of a geek, I'm kind of a data nerd, and I want to go past those simple lessons to saying, okay, I remember when I met James Brown and I thought, what a special guy. And sure enough, he was. What happened? What is he doing? Is there a way to figure out what individuals do that have that standout quality? So when we do an executive search, we'll have, loads and loads of interviews. You might have 1,000 people interested in a CEO job or a head of a school job or whatever it is we're looking for. It narrows down to 100, it narrows down to dozens, it narrows down. When it gets down to the very best of the best, like the last 10 maybe in a search, then we will give those people a face-to-face interview. We've probably already interviewed them 2 or 3 times otherwise, but a long format face-to-face interview. We realized we've done 30,000 of those face-to-face interviews now. And because I have a team that is really great, they've tracked every note that we've taken, every phone call we've had, every text that we've had, everything these people have done, and we've been able to say, of those 30,000 that are the very best of the best, can we figure out who the best of those are and what, if anything, they have in common? So we set out on a long research project. We don't usually have time to do that because we're growing every year, but then we had this thing called a pandemic where, unlike you guys, we didn't have a lot going on. You guys probably worked harder during that time than anybody there was. I mean, golf went crazy during that time. But we sat around and didn't have a whole lot to do, so we started a research project where, let's see, can you move to the next one? Let's see if I can. Can you flip the slide for me? There we go, thanks. And one more. Which humans stand out of the crowd? Oh, by the way, what we did in studying these 30,000 was a giant research project to say, is there anything these people have in common? And it was going to be a very selfish project where I just wanted to be able to identify great talent quickly and be a better search firm. What we found was the people that we studied do have things in common, and it wasn't just something for us. It was important enough that we think we found a roadmap for standing out of the crowd in the 12 distinguishing habits that we found in those who are the best of the best. When you look at the best of the best, whoever rises out of the crowd, do they have anything in common? This was the question. The answer came back, yes. And it was a stunningly clear list of things that people do that make them stand out in the crowd. I thought the list would be, oh, they're all 6 feet tall. Oh, they all have fabulous hair. Oh, he was the quarterback. She was the head cheerleader. Oh, they all have IQs of 170. Oh, they all went to an Ivy League school, or they're well connected. It wasn't any of those things. It wasn't God-given traits. It was habits. 12 habits that the best of the best consistently practice. And they're habits that these unicorns, we call them, tend to practice that the rest of us tend to not practice. And the really shocking thing of our study was, these are all habits that can be learned. Like, they really can be taught and learned. So rather than just have a selfish research project, it turned into, why don't we write a book? Why don't we get this out there for people? Because we think we found a roadmap to actually becoming irreplaceable. A true roadmap to the right way to stand out in the crowd. There are 12 of those habits. You can see there's a shameless plug for a book there. But I want to share a few of them with you, and some things you won't read in the book about what we're learning about people that stand out in the crowd. So maybe flip to the next slide. I don't know why I'll share one of the 12 habits is just called the fast. Okay? Well, you say the fast. Well, that's not a habit, that's a trait. Well, news for you. I'm not fast. Just ask Doug. I'm coming through the ball at maybe 99 miles an hour now. It's not looking good. The club head speed's going down. I'm not fast. I'm Dutch. We're not built for speed. We're built for wind resistance. You know. So when I say fast, it's a little misleading. It should be responsive. Unicorns, people who stand out in the crowd, actually get back to people quickly. And nearly everyone else doesn't. If you want to be irreplaceable, if you want to stand out in the crowd, if you want to build a team at your club that stands out in the crowd, the simplest thing you can do is just get back to people. And we looked over and over and over. It's almost like unicorns are just bent on reaching back to you right away. And the rest of us are like, I'll get to it tomorrow. In college, I studied a lot of things that really didn't help me in business. One was Latin, but it's interesting, the word in Latin that means tomorrow is the word crastina. You recognize that word at all? You put it off for tomorrow, what are you doing? It's what we do. We procrastinate. What we learned about the fast is, what we learned about the responsive is, they almost always get back to an important message within 1 minute. Can you say that about your team? Can you say that about you? Here's what we learned about, just use one example. We looked at dating sites. I don't know if you remember eHarmony. It's like the OG of like the swipe left, swipe right world that people live in now. But that's like basically a website of people that are lonely, that want to find a partner, and you sign up, and then the software sends you, we found 3 potential matches. And so we asked people at eHarmony, what's the average response time when people get that email? They say, oh, several days. Like, really? They don't just, I mean, you would think immediately. Sales and marketing. I don't know if you know, anybody, how many of you know the term inbound marketing? It's pretty simple. If you, nowadays, if you're talking with your spouse about a car you might want to buy, and then all of a sudden you get on social media, and what's all over your social media? The stupid car you were talking about, right? That's inbound marketing sophisticated, but the simplest form of inbound marketing is, hey, fill out a form and we'll get back to you. Want to learn more? Fill out a form. We'll get back to you. Everybody's done this at some point, right? Okay, massive study was done. We were one of the very early adopters in this. We started our company totally by chance, right when Twitter started, right when blogging started, right when inbound marketing started. So we've been studying this for a while. Massive study was done. Tens of thousands of companies that pay lots and lots of money to have a lead system where you fill out a form and somebody will get back to you. Okay. So the question in this massive study was, does how fast you get back to people make a difference in how many times you make the sale? Good question. So they started measuring like response time. So in a sales conversation, kind of like in a golf lesson, you're not trying to solve everything in one lesson. You're just trying to get a little bit better each time. In a sales conversation, all you're trying to do is get to the next sales conversation. You're not trying to close the sale right away, right? So if somebody fills out a form and says, yes, I would like more information, please contact me. Does response time matter? Here's what the study found, and I didn't bring the graph. If people respond to a form that gets filled out, doesn't matter what business, doesn't matter what you're selling, if they get back to a form that's filled out within 1 minute of that form coming in, with a real response, not some bot-driven automated thing, within 1 minute, they have a 98% chance of having a sales conversation with the person that filled out that form. Okay, 98% chance, 1 minute. If you wait 20 minutes from when the form's filled out, drops to 60%. You've just thrown away a whole lot of your chances at having that conversation. If you wait, the time goes down, down, down. I'll save you the details. But if you wait 24 hours to get back to somebody, if they fill out a form, you have a less than 1% chance of ever talking to that person. Here's the punchline. What was the average response time of all these companies that are actually paying all this money for inbound software? 42 hours. People pay all this money to have a vehicle to help them create more sales or bring in more members or book more lessons or whatever, and they just don't get back to people. When I started our company, Adrian and I had just gotten married. We just blended our families. This is a long, long time ago. And in fact, I came home. I saw what an exec search firm did at the company where I was working at Anadarko, and it was amazing, and I'd never seen anything like that. And I knew that churches were terrible at hiring, and that's where we started, was saying, could we help churches find their pastor quicker and better? And I came home and I said to Adrian, no, hey babe, I think I'm supposed to quit my job and start something new for churches. And she looked at me and said, that's because churches love new ideas, right? Said no one ever. And it was the fall of 2008, which is arguably the worst time in human history to quit your job and start something new for churches. So, but we did, and when you're a father of 6 children and you're quitting your job and you're starting something new, if people called me and said, William, could you come meet with us about, I was like, yes, because we need to eat. And I kept getting back to people very quickly, almost maniacally. Over and over and over, people said, William, you have no idea how uncommon it is that you're actually getting back to people. If I text Doug some weirdo question about one of the million putters that I've bought, one wife, but pretty polygamous with putters. Sorry, true confession, lots of putters. If I text him, he gets right back to me. He stands out in the crowd. Are you building a team that says, let's just get back to people quickly? And you say, well, I can't do that all the time, William. When I first talked about starting a search firm, I talked to a guy who was with the biggest search firm in the world, which genius marketing move. Everyone knows the biggest search firm in the world now because it's called Korn Ferry. They developed talent, so they invested in a developmental league. Pretty smart. I talked to one of the guys at Korn Ferry and I said, I don't know if I'll be any good at this. He said, let me ask you a question. And this was 2008. There weren't even iPhones. It hadn't come out yet. I said, okay, what's the question? He said, imagine you get to go on a one-on-one trip with one of your daughters skiing. And you're on the ski lift and you're talking to her and it's really great, and your phone rings. Do you answer it? And I said, well, it depends on who it is. He said, you're going to do fine. So what do you mean? He said, first of all, you had your phone. Secondly, you checked it. Thirdly, you used some discernment to say, well, should I get back to him or not? You do that, you'll be fine. Can you build a way to get back to people faster when it matters in a real human response? 98% chance within 1 minute, less than 1% chance if it's a day. Clickers should work as well. Sorry. Also, little pro tip before I leave this point and move to another habit. You can interview for this. How do you build a team of people that respond quickly? If you're interviewing with us for a position at our company, and I've told this story too many times now, it's not a surprise anymore, but if you interview with us, let's say James says, Houston Oaks, I'm tired of it, the pickleball's loud, I don't want to do this anymore, I'm going to go into the search business, I'm going to interview with William. Great. So James comes in, he interviews with us. Maybe we interview him in Dallas. So we fly him all the way to Dallas. He interviews all day long, and then he flies home. He's getting home late. He gets a text from a number he doesn't know. And the text says, hey James, my name's Ben. I work at Vanderbloemen. I wasn't in the office today when you interviewed. I heard everybody loved you. I'd love to connect with you sometime. Have a great night. If James doesn't text back, that's okay, he's not going to lose the job. If James texts back within 24 hours, which makes him way better than the industry average of 42 hours, well now we're like, oh, James might be worth being on our team. If James texts back that same night, even if it's, hey man, great to meet you Ben, I got to put the kids to bed, let's talk next week. Now it's like, wow. If he texts back within a minute and says, oh man, yeah, just getting back to Houston. Did you see CJ Stroud actually kind of shined in the Pro Bowl? Well, now he got back within a minute and he was interesting and engaging and real. And that makes us say he's the same kind of crazy we are. And we just interviewed him without interviewing him. As you're building your team and you're looking for people that can stand out and be irreplaceable, don't fool yourself into thinking the interview is the hour and a half you have set aside. It's every interaction you have with them, and you can kind of hack into that by sending a text. Now, some of you are out there saying, if I text people late at night, they're going to quit, they're not going to come, they're going to get all up in arms. I hear that, and you don't want to abuse people in the workplace, but at the same time, which is more kind? To not bother somebody with a text during an interview and then they get to work and they're expected to respond and don't? Or to go ahead and interview for it on the front end? Because you guys, this is a service industry, right? And a lot of times it's responding when you don't want to, responding when you shouldn't have to. But as you're building your team, you might think about hiring around some of these qualities, and the one that I would point out first is speed. Do they get back to people intentionally, quickly, and in a way that's real and human? So that's the FAST. Very first habit of the 12 that's in the book. By the way, I put a point in here. If you start doing this 1 minute thing, sometimes I talk about this, and then bosses go home and staffs blow up because it's like, oh gosh, we gotta get back to people real quick. Just build some guardrails for your own communication. At our office, if you email me after hours, I know that means I need to get back to you within 24 hours. If you Slack me after hours, I know that I need to get back to you that night. If you text me after hours, I need to answer pretty much right away. And if you call me after hours, I'm picking up. And we've all just sort of agreed as a team, that's the after hours rule book. And nobody really abuses it. Now, it means that we can't be on a group text string during the Masters in the final round saying, here, we're on the back nine, the tournament just started. No, that doesn't work. But if you build guardrails for your team about what responsiveness looks like and when it's really important, you can build a team of people that stand out of the crowd and are irreplaceable. Okay, moving on from the FAST. You make this slide go, it doesn't want to, keep going. Yep. Remember we talked about all 5 generations in the workforce? This is what's coming. Isn't this interesting? Look, this is 2019. The workforce has 44% millennials, and then boomers and Gen Z and Gen X. In 2025, it's millennials and Gen Zs, and then the rest of us. And you know, you all look great, but I'm not seeing a lot of millennials and Gen Zs, right? So how do you work with these people? This is another one of the standout qualities that we found was likability. And if you've noticed, millennials and Gen Zs really pay a lot of attention to whether they like somebody or not. I used to have I went to seminary at Princeton a long time ago, and I had a preaching professor who used to say, people will not learn from someone they do not like. Isn't that great? Think about that. You know, people that are, and I thought, that is so true. I said, now, I don't know that anyone's ever said that they really like Bill Belichick, right? I mean, everybody had a coach in football or something that you didn't like him, you respected him, but you might learn from him and you didn't like him. You know, it's been so interesting to watch Saban and Belichick retire right at the same time, both the greatest at what they've done. I think Saban was better because Saban adapted with the times. He went from a defensive-minded coach to the offensive guru. And one of the changes he made that people don't give him credit for and he'll get written about is the way he started making a priority of being likable to his players. Having them over to the house when they're getting recruited to see his car. Like, likability is going to be a huge difference maker. You look at coaches now and he's a player's coach. Like, it's a whole different thing in football now, how you have to cater to personalities because the generations that are coming value likability. So I've always asked, how do you become likable? Because I've never been described as, oh, William, I just like him so much. So I'm really interested when I hear that the best of the best are likable. And in the book, you'll read some things about, every chapter in the book has, here's what we've learned from data, here's what we learned from the unicorns, the 30,000 that we interviewed, and here's a plan for getting better at each of these 12 habits. These three are not in the book. Hacks for being more likable with people, any generation, but particularly as millennials and Gen Zs begin to become the dominant group of people that we have to deal with in a service industry. First of all, key to being likable is listening. People want to be heard. You know, it's so interesting. I have had the chance to be around a lot of really successful people. I served a wonderful congregation in Houston and played a lot of golf at River Oaks, and if you guys, in fact, it's where I met James, and if you guys know that crowd, there's just a lot of leaders, right? And one of the most interesting things being around some of the people that are really the best in the world at what they do is I just have the hardest time getting them to talk about themselves. Some people, you know, they walk in the shop, they want to tell you all about themselves, but the really successful people I've met and want to be like are always deflecting the conversation back to me. Well, tell me about me. Tell me. Talk to me. I want to hear you. People want to be heard. You know, we titled the book, Be the Unicorn, because my daughter loves unicorns and unicorns stand out in the crowd. The publisher hated it. They thought it was totally fruity. They thought, I mean, like, are we doing all rainbows? What are we, you know? And so we were looking for alternate titles, and when we said Be the Unicorn, the one that stands out in the crowd, the alternate title for the book really should have been, oh wow, I guess Mom was right. Because most of these 12 habits that we discovered were things your mom told you all along, like, the good Lord gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, William. Think about it. Listen more than you talk. People want to be heard. People want to be asked about themselves. How many questions are you asking a day? That's a really great audit to do. I'm trying to do it to myself. How many times am I telling people what to do versus how many times am I asking a question? Whether it's giving a lesson, talking about whatever the new thread count of the apparel that came out. How many times are you asking questions instead of giving out data? Now, I'm not here to like persuade people about faith or that sort of thing, but I try to model some of my life after Jesus. And what's so interesting about him is how he asked so many questions. He wasn't walking around shouting and preaching and shaking a finger. He would ask a question. And it was something, I'll get the numbers wrong, but it's something like Jesus was asked somewhere around 130 questions in the New Testament. 90 of the times he was asked questions, he answered by asking another question. You will be more likable if you'll just ask people questions. I had at First Presbyterian Houston, we had a member there, Lloyd Benson. Anybody remember Senator Benson? Like he ran for vice president against Quayle. Remember the debate where Quayle said something and he's like, I knew Jack Kennedy, you're no Jack. So Senator Benson. So he dies and I have to do the funeral. And it was hilarious. I was sitting over at Miss Benson's house with her the morning after he died, and she's on the phone, and an aide walks in and says, President Bush is on the phone and would like to talk to you. And she said, well, you'll have to tell him I'm on the phone with his dad, the other President Bush. So it was kind of a high-profile funeral. And she said, William, would you mind if I picked who did the eulogy? I said, that's fine. She said, well, President Clinton wants to do eulogy, and you can just speak after him. That's the shortest straw in public speaking that you can draw, speaking after he's So we had a big thing planned for all of us being able to visit all the Washington dignitaries. We're going to have the funeral, we're going to have the graveside, and then everybody's going to get together and mingle at the graveside, and then go back to the church where lots and lots of people were to have the big public funeral. Rained like crazy. There was no indoor facility. So we ended up having to go back to the church, and the long story made short is I ended up sitting in my office with President Clinton for about 3 hours, just two of us. And so I thought, well, hey, I don't vote a whole lot of the same ways he votes. So like, I don't dislike him, but I'm like, okay, let's see why everybody likes this guy so much. And I tried to get him to talk about himself. And you would think, like with the caricatures, he wouldn't have it. I'd try and talk to him about it. He said, oh, look on your desk. That's a brochure for a trip. I'm like, yes, I'm taking a group on a trip to Greece and Turkey. We're going to study the footsteps of Paul. And he said, you should call my friend. And it's like basically the Pope of the Eastern Orthodox Church, like the Patriarch or whatever. And this is 2006, so there's no Google or, I'm like, well, Mr. President, I'll get on the internet and I'll find his phone number and I'll look him up. And he said, no, I'll take care of it. And so then I'm like, okay, well, I can play this game too. He had a little yarn bracelet on his arm. I said, tell me about that yarn bracelet on your arm. He said, all these children in Bolivia make these, and they're trying to sell them, and they're trying to start a microeconomy, and so I wear it around to tell people, oh, that's fabulous. We do some mission work in that part of the world. You need to know my friend. He's the U.S. ambassador to Bolivia. I'm like, well, Mr. President, I'll just look up his number. And he said, no, I'll take care of it. And this went on 2, 3 more things where I'm trying to get him to talk about him. He's pointing back to me, asking me about me, and and then promising to do something. By the way, this is a sidebar from the likable, and it hits another point in a minute. But the next week, I got a copy of his autobiography sent to me with a lovely note written in it. I got a call from the office of whatever the Pope of the Eastern Orthodox Church is. I got a call from the ambassador guy. Everything followed through. That's a different point. But he asked questions. Do an audit for yourself. Challenge your team to do the same thing. Can you go through a day asking more questions than giving more instructions? And in an era that we're living in now, where it is going to be millennials and Gen Zs and running the world, giving out facts is not super helpful because they'll just Google you. Oh, actually, more people use the overlap grip, not the interlock. You're wrong. I just looked it up, and ChatGPT told me that questions are the future for being liked. And then the last hack for being more likable, people want to be seen. I have a friend who runs a very large shelter for the homeless, one of the largest in the country. It's in Los Angeles. So what's the biggest thing your homeless friends really want? He said, for somebody to just look at them. They just want to be noticed. Honestly, William, they don't care if you give them $5 at the corner. They just want you to just actually look at them and acknowledge. People want to be seen, and if you focus on people knowing that you see them, you'll be more likable. Free tip, not in the book. Let me ask you a question. When you look at people, how do you look at them? You look right here in the center, so you're kind of looking at them. That's not how people feel seen. Okay? Basic human biology. 2 eyes. One of our eyes is what we see with. The other eye is where we get our peripheral vision. You're really only using one eye to look at somebody. All right, life hack. 90% of all humans are right eye dominant. I mean, look at how guns are built. They're built for right eye dominant. So if you're sitting talking to someone, I would encourage you to take a gamble. A 9 out of 10 chance that they're looking through their right eye. And look them dead in their right eye. Not the nose, not both eyes, just right in their right eye. You look at somebody like that, they're going to feel seen. When you're giving a lesson, when you're talking to the crabby member who wants to do whatever they feel that they're special and entitled and should be able to do, even though it's in the book that they shouldn't, look people dead in the eye. Ask them questions. Let them talk. Likability may be the most important trait to focus on for the future as the future of the workforce changes to generations that really value being liked. Okay, moving on, if I can move the slides on. Obviously, tech is not my thing. There we go. Oh, isn't this fabulous? I found this when I was looking around for you guys, and you guys said, oh, that's not right, William. I don't know. I pulled it off the internet, so it must be true. But if you look, you can do the math real fast. What happened in the 10 years between 7 and 17? Clubhead speed got faster. Ball speed got faster. Everything got faster. The longest drives kept going longer and longer and longer. How did all that speed happen? Yes, the golf ball. Yes, launch monitors. Yes, figuring out things. But more than ever, pros are focusing on their agility, their ability to bend, their ability to stretch, their ability to do yoga. The guy that trained me forever was one of the, when the PGA Tour used to have just a trailer with a coach, and you could go in there and work out, but like early Tiger days. He was one of those trainers. He said that was the thing he saw more than anything else in the pros that came to the trailer was an increased focus on agility. The people who stand out in the crowd, the unicorns, are just hell-bent on getting more and more flexible. Now, some habits of the unicorns are easy to pick up. Other habits get harder with age. Agility gets harder with age. Anybody lose any driving distance in the last 10 years? Agility gets harder with age. I like to go run a little bit, and it's probably more like jog would be a better word, but it's slow. And I got, when I turned 40, I got to the age where I had to do a bunch of stretching, or I wasn't, I was going to get injured. And the stretching was actually harder than the workout itself, because I'm not a real flexible guy. And so I was sitting in the basement, and I'm reaching over to touch my toes. I'm about to die trying to touch my toes. Our youngest, our 7th child, comes in. She was probably 2.5, toddling around, She looks at me. I'm sweating like crazy trying to touch my toes. Just looks at me up and down and sits down on the floor next to me and ties herself into this human knot, which only little kids can do, right? And looks up at me all sweet, and then unties herself, stands up, laughs out loud at me, and walks out of the room without saying a word. And it dawned on me then, oh, William, every day you're alive, you get less flexible. And that's not just your physical body. Before too long, you end up saying, well, we've never done it that way before. You know, before too long, you end up saying, well, but we've always done that. I mean, Wednesday night's always fried chicken night, whatever the thing. Agility goes away with age. And the unicorns fight that like crazy. If you think back to the pandemic and who really, and I call it calcification, to be clear. It's just natural. You're not wrong for getting stiffer as you get older. It's just how we're built. The unicorns are built differently. They're always trying a new thing. They're always taking another course. You can interview for this as well as you're building your team out. And you want to say, well, I want a team full of unicorns. Interview for new. You know, ask people during an interview, say, so what's a new hobby you're taking up? What's a new thing you're learning? I was interviewing, we were doing a chief communications officer search right during the heart of the pandemic. Everything's locked down. And this is a massive organization, and they're figuring out as this communication surge happens during the pandemic that, oh gosh, we can't just do printed things anymore. We certainly can't do just mail anymore. We still have to do that. But now we got to learn how to get our things out on TikTok. We got, I don't even know what's Snapchat. We need somebody who can do all of that. So they want somebody very agile. They task us for looking at this. And I'll never forget, I was interviewing for new. I said, tell me something new that you're doing. And this woman that we were interviewing that was fabulous said, I'm learning French. And I thought, well, that's kind of a waste. I mean, I like wine, so I studied French a little bit, but like, and she lived in California. I'm like, I live in Texas, you live in California. Wouldn't Spanish be a little more helpful, like just for general life skills than French? She said, yeah, but I'm not doing it for that reason. I said, why? She said, well, my daughter is class of 2020, high school. I promised her a trip. Ever since she was a little girl, she wanted to go to Paris. We're going to go to Paris for graduation. And now we're having this stupid pandemic, and we can't go anywhere. So we decided that whenever this is over, it might be a year or two, we're going to go back, and between now and then, we're going to learn French together so we can speak French when we go to France. And I thought, okay, that is unicorn level agility. Now, you have to be careful when you're looking for people who are always looking for a new thing, always trying to be agile. You don't want, some people have what I call shiny object syndrome. New thing, you know, or dogs see a squirrel, you know. You don't want distracted people on your team, but you do want people that are committed to saying, well, how could we do this differently? If you think back, I cannot imagine the pivoting you guys had to do during the pandemic. When everyone else is shut down and you're busier than you've ever been, who were the most valuable people on your team? Wasn't it the people who said, well, let's figure out a way. I can do that. I can learn. I can find a new way. I can, you know, whoever came up with those little things that go on the cup where you can actually lift the ball out of the cup without touching. I wish we still had those. Somebody with some agility figured that out. Like, how can you, as a person who every day you're alive, you get less flexible, how can you today say, I'm going to commit to stretching myself, to learning something different? How can you start to build a team that way? When you build people who are agile, when you build it into yourself, you become irreplaceable. Before AI came out, and it's sort of been coming out since about 2012, but you know, it really hit the scene a year or so ago. Before that, massive study was done that said in the last 10 years, we've seen more change than in the 100 years prior to that. You think about all the changes that have happened. And this study went on to say, and in the next 10 years, we'll see twice as much change. The people who are going to last in the future will be the people who are saying, how do I become more elastic for the future? Agility is going to be more important, not less, as the world continues to change. And then finally, the agile, I'm noticing, are people who run toward technology and not away from it. So I play at Champions in Houston, and Mr. Burke, who's now at rest, was not known for a lot of change. He didn't care much for change at all. We finally got new golf carts now that Mike took over it, because Mr. Burke didn't think you should ride in a golf cart. It costs you 6 shots around. I love the tradition that he had. I loved visiting with him every chance I got. But it is nice to see some agility coming into the fold now as his son and grandson start to take over operations of the club. Agility doesn't mean tradition goes away. It just means you stretch. The best example I can think of, I study apps for iPhones all the time. I've got way too many on my phone. The best app I've ever seen that's always better every single year is the Masters app. It's amazing. And this, if there's any club in America that could just get away with saying, well, we've always done it that way, that's the one, right? But for some reason, they're like, no, we're going to figure out, you can watch 4 different holes. So I'll have, my iPad here and then the app running on the TV there. So it is like a freaking trader's desk during Masters Week at my house. So I'm watching everything I can. But they could just drop back and say, well, it's just tradition. But they've said, let's be agile. Let's keep growing. Let's keep innovating. Okay, the anticipators. As another habit that we saw in unicorns. Who thinks ahead? You guys, I don't even have to spend much time at all on this, because I can say it really simply. When you tee off, don't you look at where the pin is first? I have to explain this to people that aren't in the industry, right? They're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, when Tiger's on a par 5, he wants to know where the pin is before he ever lines up his tee shot. Well, why? Because he can't hit the second shot he wants if he doesn't know where the pin is. He can't hit the third shot if you want. You think ahead. Unicorns are people who are always thinking a little bit ahead. And if there's one lesson that happened in the pandemic for me, it was learning that thinking ahead does not mean thinking way far ahead. It just means thinking a little bit more ahead than the rest of everybody else. Every single day, things changed during the pandemic. So you didn't have to, as a business, all of our clients shut down. Not your case, I get it. But we had to figure out new things, but we just had to figure out a little bit quicker than everybody else, not more than that. There's in the Hebrew scriptures, there's a line that says, your word, David, the king, said, your word, the Bible, is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. It's a very popular verse that people know. There's songs, and I used to think growing up that meant, I guess what God's saying is you read enough of the Bible, you can see 10 years in the future. Now, I was wrong. If you go read what King David was actually talking about, he said, your word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. He was talking about these little shoes that you would wear at night in the ancient Middle East that had lanterns on them. And so when you walked, the lanterns would give you just enough light for the next step. And sometimes I see leaders when they think, I don't know how to think ahead, I can't see a 10-year vision. You don't have to. You just have to think just a little bit ahead. Just a little bit ahead. Greatest example of this ever was when I happened into an executive assistant. My executive assistant, she had 3 babies in 4 years. And then something about needing to raise children and be a responsible mother, and I need to take time off and be at home. And so I got stuck without an assistant. And at the time, I was running the entire firm. I was also doing all the searches. I was the cook, the bottle washer, the whole on the road. Scheduling was a nightmare. And so I'm going to actually do a search to find my next assistant. We had a brand new employee who came in to help at the office, because she was friends with one of our very best people. And I didn't even know what to do with her, but Sarah said, William, she's great. She'll just help out around the office. Her name's Bethany. And Bethany, like, we served, at the time, we served mainly churches, and mainly, like, kind of button-down churches that after church, they go to your golf club to have brunch, and then they, you know, like, that was kind of the client base. So Bethany shows up. Bethany's got 2 full-sleeve tats, which, you know, at the time was a radical thing. And she had her previous employer, she worked at a Gothic wig shop. Like RuPaul was her client, for real. And so now she's helping out around the office. So at the time, we were using our inbound marketing. If a lead came in, somebody filled out a form, I'm like, I'm getting back to him in 60 seconds. Because just maniacal. I didn't even know the data that showed that that was what you needed to do, but I knew it was. So I'm sitting on a plane, and this is so far back, this is before the iPad. You remember the little sticks you used to have to buy from like Singular or AT&T, and you put them in your USB port and it would give you a signal on your laptop? So I had those, and I was always in seat 2B because the flight attendant couldn't see me real well, and I could stay on a little bit longer before you have to close your computer before we take off, right? So lead comes in right before we're taking off, and it's in Spanish. And I'm like, I need to get back to him, but I don't know Spanish. So I text Bethany. I said, Bethany, I seem to remember you know a little bit of Spanish. Look at this. Let's talk about it when I land. Okay. Get up in the air. I can open my computer back up. I look at it a little closer, and I don't know a ton of Spanish, but I knew enough to know, oh, this isn't Spanish. It was Portuguese, which probably means it's someone from Brazil, right? And if you know the Brazilian culture at all, they do Spanish and Portuguese, and they get pretty crabby when you don't know the difference between the two. Oh, you're not from around here, you don't know. And so I'm like, oh no, this is terrible. And so I land, and the minute I land and we get on the phone, I call Bethany. I'm like, Bethany, don't do anything with that lead. She said, oh no, I already did. I'm like, oh. So what'd you do? She said, well, first of all, it wasn't Spanish. I said, oh really? She said, yeah, it was Portuguese. I said, how'd you figure that out? She said, well, I'm fluent in Spanish. It's not Spanish. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's helpful. But you figured out Portuguese? Yes. Now, this would have been in 2011. So think backwards technologically. I said, okay, and she said, I hope I'm not in trouble. I went ahead and responded. I said, well, what'd you do? If you're in trouble, how you responded? So when I figured out it was Portuguese, I found there's this new thing online. It's like a translator, and it translated it for me into English. And the guy is getting ready to speak to a big group about succession, and we've written books on this and done studies on succession. And he wanted to know if we had any resources that would help address succession in this particular context. So I went on our website. We have that search function, which is way too clunky. We've got to fix that, William. But I found an article you wrote that was pretty much what he wanted. And then I ran it through that translator I found online. So I got it into Portuguese, and then I went ahead and branded it with our brand, and I saved it as a PDF because I don't want him messing with your words and saying you said something you didn't. And I just went ahead and sent it to him. I hope I'm not in trouble. I said, you know, remember when I said, can you fill in while I'm looking for a new executive assistant? Yeah, I'm not looking anymore. Can you stay? She didn't think that far ahead. She just anticipated just a little bit. Like, how can you ask what's the next thing? In your leadership, at your position, how can you say, how do I think about where the pin is on this hole before I hit my drive? It's not, you don't have to think the whole golf course, just that hole to inform one shot. Can you think a little farther ahead? If you show anticipation with students and members, if you show anticipation in the AI world, how could we be using AI rather than running from it? Anticipators will be irreplaceable in the future. How can you learn to ask a question that's just a half step ahead? When you're interviewing your next team member, how can you interview in a way that would say, can they think one step ahead? You guys are smart. You'll figure out how to do that. But I promise you, this is not just, well, William sort of thinks anticipators are right. 30,000 data points, absolutely top talent people, they all anticipate. Okay, moving on quickly, I hope. Listen to this 1-minute clip from President Obama. I don't know, do you have to hit play or do I hit play?
Meet your next pillow. Why do we make our pillow in the shape of a cube? I'll tell you.
Nope, that's not a President Obama.
Trying to fit a round peg.
Learn how to.
You can move to the next slide. Basically what he's saying, and you can look up, just Google President Obama gets stuff done. Basically the slide, all he's saying is, I'll tell you who made it in my administration was the people who got stuff done. And he said, and there are lots of people that want to focus on studying things forever and not actually getting anything done. But the people that are doers stand out in the crowd. The strongest bias for action was in these 30,000 that we interviewed. And most people procrastinate. It's similar to responsiveness, but do you actually just go get things done? The little 2.5-year-old that laughed at me, her very first word, she was in one of those bouncy things that hangs from the door jamb, you know, the little things kids bounce in, and her favorite toy was across the room. And she looked over at Adrienne, my wife, and she pointed at the toy, and she said, "Do it." I guess that means brilliant. And it was like, that's like just do it, but shorter. So, do you have in you an ability to say, I'm going to do this now, not later? Very similar to responsiveness, but actual action. And in a world that's becoming more and more confused and noisy, the people who will just focus and get one thing done are going to stand out in the crowd. Very first church I was a senior pastor of, I was a young guy, 28 years old. They'd moved, they'd sold their building, they were moving to a new place, and they wanted me to come help get moved. And we were looking for a place to be the little temporary facility we were in. We outgrew. And so we needed a new place, and we were driving up and down the road. I was driving with a guy who'd been in the church, and he'd left because he got upset with church politics and, you know, just the mess that it can be sometimes. And I was trying to convince him to come back. Really influential business guy, wonderful guy, terrible golfer, but played enough golf with him that, you know, earned his respect. And we're driving, and he says, you know, this YMCA, our property that we bought to put the church in is right here, 200 yards down the road and across the street, there's a YMCA. And he said, you know, that YMCA is not used on Sundays. I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, you know, I know the chair of the board of that YMCA. I bet, I'll give you his number. I bet if you call him, he'll rent you that facility. I'm like, okay, cool. So he hands me the number, and then we sit down in my office to visit for a while, and I'm asking him about his family. I'm trying to let him be seen and heard, and I'm asking questions and all that. And he looks at me and says, why haven't you called him yet? I said, Todd, you just gave me his number 5 minutes ago, and I'm trying to talk to you about you. He said, I think you need to call him right now. And so I stopped what I was doing. I called him right then. Done deal verbally over the phone, and I learned, William, why in the world? And Todd said to me afterward, he said, William, here's a business lesson I've learned. Most of the time, the first chance I have to take action on something I know I need to do is the best chance. The first chance I have is the best chance. Maybe you've had that happen where you turning left into traffic and you got a chance and you don't take it, but then you wait 20 minutes for the next chance. The doers are the ones that stand out of the crowd. If you think back to the pandemic, when you're running around like crazy trying to run a golf course, it was probably people who just said, let's do it. HubSpot is one of my favorite companies. Please don't tweet this because they'll get mad, but they have me come up and speak. They're a big inbound marketing company all over the world. I go up to speak to their staff, and I'm giving all this advice about how they can be better. And then they give out their awards. And you know, they're a cool, millennial-driven company. And they gave out the Jedi Award. They gave lightsabers to 3 people. And I'm like, that's so cool. Is that like the best performer of the quarter? Like, no. We only do this every now and then. And only after a really hard push on something we didn't see coming, and somebody rose to the top and got it done. I said, well, why is it the Jedi Award? And they're like, William, just effing do it. Jedi. So the Jedi Award was just do it. Do you have people that are just doing it? Invest in those. Are you taking the very first opportunity you have to get something done? And then finally, let's move on. I'll wrap up with, I'm going to skip. That's a really funny clip, but we all know it. But like the solvers, okay, and then I want to spend 1 minute on one more. So real simple question. Everyone in life either lives on the problem side of the equation or the solution side of the equation. Everyone is either bent more toward Eeyore or more toward Tigger. Does that make sense? Or yeah, yeah, yeah. The yeah, 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 they're all the unicorns. There are no unicorns that sit and dwell on problems the whole time. And if you want to be irreplaceable in this world, come with solutions, not just problems. Come with an idea about how to fix it, not complain about how it's bad. And as you do that, and you find people on your staff that are solvers, let me give you one piece of leadership advice, and I'll close with this. If you give away tasks to your staff, you will raise up great doers. If you give away authority to your staff, you will raise up leaders. Give away tasks, you'll raise up doers. Give away authority, you'll turn those doers into leaders. Doesn't come without risk, doesn't come without, a bad decision made still lands on your desk if you're the head person. But look for solvers. And I could spend time going over more and more and more. I would say the last piece of advice, and I'll just ditch the slides, is to say the one thing we noticed about unicorns that made them stand out more than anyone else in the crowd was that they were driven by a purpose. They had a guiding star. All achievers in human history have had a guiding star, even the bad achievers. Hitler had a guiding star and got stuff done, right? If you can take your work at your club, at your teaching facility, at whatever part of the industry you're in, and let your team see that you're working for more than just how to get the ball in the hole quicker. We're elevating people, not just teaching a sport. You're going to stand out in the crowd. You're going to draw more people to yourself. I'll never forget when we took our daughter, who played quite a bit, took a lesson or two from Lisa, I think. She went to the first tee. We were trying to get her out of the bubble of just playing at River Oaks, so we took her down to the first tee. She had to take the player course from, I think it was Ty Moran was running the first tee in Houston at the time. And, okay, first lesson, everybody. Here's what we do. How do you start your golf match? People started putting their ball on the ground on a tee. People started stretching. He said, no, no, no. Here's how you start a golf match. And he walked over and he shook hands with one of the players. And he took those kids from thinking about a sport to thinking about something bigger. And he stood out. I'm pretty sure he's been promoted several times since then. The workforce is getting crowded. A lot of the jobs that you guys currently have are going to change drastically in the next 10 years. It may be more important than ever to figure out how to stand out and be irreplaceable. And here's the secret sauce to all 12 of these habits. Standing out isn't about saying me, 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 me. These unicorns were focused on serving other people. Every one of these 12 habits was about training people to be more intentional about how they deal with other humans. And by serving others and having a how can I help you mentality, these 12 habits made these people stand out. And I believe if you'll study them and learn them and teach them to your team, you'll stand out, your team will stand out, and you get something really great done together. Thanks for letting me come visit with you today. Appreciate you having me.